Welcome to a glimpse of the history of Dresden, Maine. My name is Eleanor Everson.
I'm Doris Souvigney, and I've been here for 89 years, and my ancestors helped to settle this town. They came from Germany, and they came to this new world, and with them they brought this chest. And that and this horseshoe, which my father always said probably fell off of one of the mules when the king was down there to tell him to leave. But it's an interesting story anyway. And
Do you think you're...
Sure. Okay, I have the letter which they brought from Germany, and they were the mayor's family. And the letter states that they had to pay, and the estimate was made later, but I'll say $20 several years ago, for each one who left the country, with a signing that they would never come back and make any claims in Germany, because they were coming to this new land. And we don't know where they and the French Huguenots who were with them were, because they left Germany in 1714, I think. They didn't get here till 1752, but researchers have told me that they think that they were down in Virginia area. I have checked with the people there in the Historical Society, and they find no records, because in this particular place in Virginia, they have 4 farms which they have built exactly like the 4 different countries who came here.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
And none of them had any mayors in them. They've refinished and refurbished these 4 countries, old farms. So we're not sure where they got, but they were here in 1752.
And where was the first settlement? Was it here in this house, or was it by the river, or?
We have a map in the history of Dresden. We don't know where they were, as I said, but then this area of the country was settled, and wealthy men were allowed to give money, to give land for money from people who had come here, and they could have 5 years to pay it back, and they had to build a cabin or a home that was livable and clear enough land to have a farm. So that's when they came. And where were they in between 1712, 14? We don't know. That's when they left England, France.
Mm-hmm.
So
No. This glimpse of Dresden's history is a project of the Dresden Historical Society to provide an informal dialogue of the years and days past. There are a number of wonderful reference books that can be consulted. This house that Doris is living in was the... How long have you been here? Since 1944?
right,
But back in the 1870s, when was it built?
we don't know. It's on the map of the 1814 map we have,
1814.
I think. It's on the map as a parsonage of the church, which was up where the Days Inn is. And when we moved here, my husband said there was a path from here across the fields to go to church.
The Methodist, that was the Methodist Church up there, and in the late 1800s the congregation moved down into the village. The building was torn down. The word is that it was moved there, but I don't believe it. From what I've been told in the past, it was torn down, and what lumber they could reuse went into the building of the new church. This area that we're looking out over today, the Eastern River, the Eastern River Valley, and the town of the village of Dresden Mills has a lot of history here. It's one of the earlier settled areas. It's not, I believe the Mayerses and the Hoodlets were settled farther down on the Eastern River. But there's Sylvester Gardner had early mills here on the stream, and a lot of houses that were on the hillside on the eastern side were moved down into the village. I even found a record yesterday where one of the houses from back of the Gagnes was moved down to South Dresden, down to Hatch's Corner.
So one of them was moved down into the village for my grandmother.
Yes. And where others went, I don't know, but they did move that one, that far. And there's one fellow used to say when they didn't have anything else to do, they'd get the horses and oxen together, and they'd move a building until the rum gave out. And then it sat there for a while till they got another keg of rum.
Eleanor, do you want to tell us a little bit about your personal history, your parents, and where you grew up?
I do live in the house that I was born in 80 years ago, over on the Kennebec. It's been in the Hathen family for over 200 years. The Hathens themselves worked up this way from the Woolwich area, but my ancestors go back into the Hoodlets and the Mayerses and the Bickfords. And that was on my mother's side. My father came from Massachusetts. Can't discount him, but he's not Dresden history at all. We farmed. There was ice houses on the farm in the 1870 to into the early 1900s, and my mother wrote the book Tidewater Ice of the Kennebec, depicting the history of the ice industry over the 50 years.
And did you both go to the same schools?
We both went to Bridge Academy. Do you want to talk about your early school days?
Well, there were 10 elementary schools in Dresden. And they took all grades 1 to 8, each one. Why? They had to walk. There were no school buses. And my father went to a school here, which now the Historical Society has bought and is using, called the Allen School. And I went to the school here in the middle of the town, called the Dresden Mills School, for 8 grades. Then high school. We were very fortunate, we should mention, Samuel Bridge, who donated the money to build the Bridge Academy for every boy and girl in 1880. To me, that's so important to think how that man included girls, because I've seen myself cut out since then lots of times. Okay. Also, this river, they're important to this town. It has been a shipping port with sailing ships. It is a source of food, smelts in the winter and other fish in the summer. And this traveling by boat also came up the Kennebec River, but not here, who come from Boston to the Kennebec River up Cedar Grove. Because when I was little, we went over there to meet my cousin from Massachusetts. I was 6 years old. And I said, how do you like our state of Maine? Because we just moved here. As I say, it's just a lot of very fascinating history in this town.
Eleanor, did you go to the same school?
I went to a one-room school over at Cedar Grove, overlooking the Eastern Steamboat Ship Wharf. It was out of operation by the time I was in school, but I do remember one morning from the schoolhouse yard looking down, and there was an oil tanker that had tied up because of the fog in the night, and there it was at the wharf.
Where was that little school?
It is presently the home of Mark and Eileen Long, and it's very well kept, and
Added on to, I presume.
I went to that school all 8 years to the same teacher, all 8 years. It was about a mile from home. Walked it most of the time. Then I went to Bridge Academy as well, and that was 3 miles. My mother said they told her it was only 2.5 miles when she walked it. She boarded over here quite a lot. She also drove a horse. I biked, I walked. After I got my license, I drove. I started out one morning on snowshoes. Walked across the fields, left until I got to an open road. About half a mile of what I would have ordinarily walked was drifted full. So I wanted to get to school that badly, and I took snowshoes. In fact, the full moon was still shining when I walked across the fields and swamp that morning. And I don't know what I would have done for a secondary education without Bridge Academy.
That's right.
I can't imagine going to Richmond or Gardner or anywhere without Bridge Academy.
Did you wear uniforms when you went to school?
No.
No.
No. We didn't wear uniforms, but one girl got called on the carpet for wearing her blouse outside of the waistband of her skirt.
Now, did you have one teacher for each subject at Bridge, or did...
No, we, in fact, did you have 3 teachers at
3
Bridge
teachers.
Academy?
We had business course, we had a course college prep, and a course that was anything that the kids could manage, but they'd get a certificate, not a diploma, that they had attended 4 years.
When I had 3 teachers the first year. It was World War II time, and the last 3 years was only 2 teachers, and they did a wonderful job. But Mr. McComb taught math and science, and Ruth Moen Bass taught commercial and languages. I don't know whether she got into Latin or not.
Well, when I went, we had 4 years of Latin, 3 years of French. We took tests, examinations for Tufts College. My group of 5 people. I have the letter from the college. They would have accepted all of us. And they said it was the highest they've ever had come in from any school this size or bigger. We had excellent teachers. I mean, now I can attest to it, because I know what the things we learned. They still come back to me. The whole history of Greece, except that sort of thing.
Eleanor, you were talking about coming on snowshoes. What other winter activities did you have?
I loved to ice skate. I would skate by myself in the morning. I would skate with the young children in the afternoon, and I would skate with the high schoolers in the evening after dark.
Where
by
did
moonlight.
you? Oh, sorry.
And our property has a swamp on it, and at that time my father kept it mowed so that there was a lot of good ice skating on that swamp. It was safe. You might find some shelly ice and get your foot wet, but you couldn't drown unless you held your head down yourself. And people came from miles around to skate there. So
Now, going back to elementary schools where I taught and also where I went, the only piece of equipment that we had was a set of swings, which was wooden frames and 3 little swings. There was nothing else. But we made good use of cardboard boxes and slid down snowbanks. We played plunder.
How do you play fun?
Plunder? You play plunder?
don't know what it is.
Plunder is a game in which you have sides, and you have, of course, a line drawn on the dirt. But on each side, over here and over here, there's a little pile of wood. And you try to grab a piece and get it for your pile. And the others try to keep it away from you. That's what we played one time. That's one game.
Did you play marbles?
I'm sorry.
Marbles?
Marbles? I think the boys did. I never did, frankly. But yes, marbles was very common. So,
And skip rope?
Jump rope?
oh,
Jump rope?
yeah, skip rope. Tag.
Yeah, tag.
Yes. And I know when I started teaching in the same school, we had a little baseball team, boys and girls, and it didn't matter which place they were playing, they went out and each other and we'd play. Then we'd come back in, and those children had parents, some of them, who were coaches on teams. So they'd tell me where I had coached wrong, or decided something wrong. It was great. I mean, it's wonderful, to listen to your kids. And they knew they could talk about it, it wouldn't hurt my feelings.
Tell us about what schools you taught in here in Dresden.
Well, I went to the little elementary school on my own. I was of 8 grades.
Start with telling how much you wanted to go that you used to
Oh,
peek in the window.
I wanted to go to school from the time I was 4 years old. I'd go over and play with the kids. I lived nearby. Then I'd climb up on the outside when they went in for recess, from recess, look in the window, and these double seats that they used to have in the schools, there'd be one outside, just to watch them. So I was ready to go to school when time came, very ready. And then, let's say I went through the whole 8 years and high school. They needed a teacher helper, where they had 45 children coming in 8 grades here in the village. So the teacher, who had her 8 weeks of preparation, all she needed, she knew I loved that sort of thing, so she invited me. And when I went in the door that morning, she said, "You take the first 4 grades, I'll take the top 4. And it was so simple for me that it didn't bother me a bit. In fact, some of my students are still living. The minister, Bruce Alexander, was one of mine. And it was just a natural thing. So, but then, later, I was on the school board. And the school board superintendent said, "I can't find anybody to get down to that little school," which is down in the little Middlebridge school at the time. And he said, "I know you worked with Miss Bailey when you were younger." I said, "Would you take it there school and start courses?" That's when I started. It took me 10 years to get my first degree, but I did. And I taught.
Did you go away to teacher training college? Did you go to college?
Did you take summer courses?
I had to go one summer for 3 weeks because they would not give you a diploma if you hadn't been on the campus. I had been on the campus Saturdays and Wednesdays, different campuses around, in order to get the first degree.
Did you go to Gorham or?
Gorham part of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Gorham, Farmington, and the University of Maine. Orno.
And you took your children to college.
Well, yes, I had some children at the time. And I went for 3 weeks. We camped, my husband and I. And I went to college, and the children went to college. In other words, they could let parents bring their children, and the children could go to their own elementary school, and my children loved it. Why? Because they had phys ed, which we didn't have in our little schools. But the teacher said to me, your children were taught early, very early. I would learn to swim right in the river. We didn't have any lessons. And we spent time fishing there. But most of the year was playing things with cardboard boxes for a boat. We'd go places and this sort of thing. We didn't have any plastic toys at that time. And I know Eleanor, one thing you asked if you worked in the, yes, I worked for the blueberry farmers, picking blueberries or cleaning them on the cloth so they could go as hand-picked blueberries, which they were, but they were also hand-picked over with all the old things taken out, the little quart boxes filled. But I did not do much of the raking, but that's what the big job was. And Eleanor can tell you her side of it.
My side was that I crawled around the fields on my hands and knees and raked up on Blins Hill. It was hot. I was out there it was a hot day. I burned my forehead and my nose, and I have suffered for it since then. Mm-hmm. One time we were up there and somebody said, duck, or hit the ground. There was a swarm of bees flew over.
So that was blueberry raking?
That was blueberries.
What other crops did you have?
My parents raised strawberries. And I'll go back a little ways. My father was a hen man from the time he came to Pittston, which up the road a little ways from where he finally married and lived. He had laying hens. He had laying hens at the house, and in 1936 a lot of them were drowned. So they looked around for what could they have for a livelihood that wouldn't drown, and they settled primarily on strawberries.
They drowned in a flood?
Hens were drowned in the flood. We had an old stable that there were hens on the ground floor and the second floor. They had time to put the hens from the ground floor up to the second floor. There was some in the barn, in the hen room in the barn, what used to be the sheep pen. And there was no place to put them. It was a narrow door, and my father would not let the men go in there. He was afraid that the water would come up suddenly and they would get caught. So we did lose some hens there. Some of them, there were roofs, and they floated, and some of the hens knew enough to stay on the roofs, but others flew down and drowned. So we had strawberries, not the acres and acres that have been in town since then, because we picked for the market. We picked for the stores in Gardner, Randolph, Farmingdale. Some went to Booth Bay, some went as far Damascotta and South Bristol. One time we shipped 2,400 quarts to Boston one night. Then the pickers turned around and picked some more for the 10 crates, 240 boxes more perhaps for the market the next morning. So that kept us busy from the time the ground thawed in the spring until it froze in the fall. But we had the Burgesses up on Blins Hill were good friends of ours, and I did rake berries up there for a few years. Started out riding up there with Ramona Norton, now cook, in a horse and buggy. After that, he hired me to drive rakers up there. That kept that and haying and some gardening. That kept us, and we did still have some laying hens. That kept us busy in the summertime.
What did you do for fun in the summer?
What did you do for fun in the summer?
That's a farming.
Fun.
Fun, oh.
Entertainment.
Entertainment.
Seldom did we get out of town. That's for one thing. And I spent most of my time alone, hiking through the woods, picking flowers, coming home and identifying them, checking anything else that I could see. I found one day the most beautiful meadow with ladies' slippers and jack in the pulpits that I ever saw. And the brook comes right down into the river here. But she mentioned hens. My father and mother, well, my father was a mechanic, and we had no farm except a vegetable garden. But my mother would buy hens from somebody around here. Well, of course, all they did was chop the head off, and you'd buy it and have to pick the feathers off and all this. But this is the part which I have written my own family story, and I remember this part. We had a iron stove with wood burning. You could take the covers off. Okay. My mother would take the cover off the stove, which was just burning a little, take a newspaper and twist it, and hold the chicken and take the fuzz off with the newspaper. Burning. I mean, you don't read of those things today so much. I have written this whole thing for my family that I have been told, and I remember. But I never forget that part.
Did she burn all the feathers? Were all the feathers still?
Oh, no, they pulled the feathers. These are pin feathers.
Yeah, okay.
Just the pin feathers, all the little fuzz.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no, those others are all pulled off fur.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to dip them in boiling water first, don't you?
Yeah. Poor
Dip them in boiling water first to get the feathers off.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
she'd take care of that, but then sometimes when you buy them, they would have pulled some of the feathers off, but generally she had to do the whole thing.
Did you cook over a wood stove?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a fireplace, but a wood stove.
Uh-huh. And were you bakers? Did you bake a lot of your, what kind of things?
All sorts of bread. Ever heard of Amadama bread? It's excellent. I made that when I was young. Sweet bread. Tarts was another old-fashioned type of dessert. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, well, it was tarts, of course, cookies, pies, duck pie.
Did you keep your own animals? Did you keep...
We were not farmers. So when Leslie and I were married, and we came here, we began to have a garden with some cows for milk for the kids, pig, and some chickens. But that's all the farming, I mean. And of course we had a lot of hay that had to be got. And we had cattle in the pasture, 5 of them.
And did you put up food for the winter?
We certainly did. Anything from the wild blueberries, rhubarb, all the things you can think of, you can, like beans, string beans, that sort of thing. Ducks. My husband went duck hunting, and I canned a lot of duck meat. And, yes.
Eleanor, did you put up a lot of food as well?
Yes, we did. It's the same things that she mentioned, and greens, dandelion greens, beet greens, pickles, and jelly, and
The old ones you put them down in a keg.
well, some, but some
sour pickles.
Some, but it was also corn relish and cucumber. My mother had a a wonderful recipe for
Yeah.
cucumber,
Right.
Oh,
ripe cucumber pickles.
Did you have a root cellar?
Oh yes, potatoes, carrots, beets,
squash.
squash. Squash didn't keep good in our cellar. Apples didn't keep good in our cellar. But
And how did you get around? I mean, you probably have various cars, but what was your first car? Do you remember?
well, when I was a baby, they went from a open touring car to a sedan to take care of the baby, and we had sedans. Always have had, and a 1.5-ton truck that either had a dump body on it or a platform body. They swapped around as the needs were, and eventually my brother did get a pickup truck, and a pickup truck's awfully handy around a farm, about as handy as a tractor with a bucket on the front of it. And we had tractors too.
Where did you go shopping?
It's better to ask when. Once or twice a year.
You had stores in the village.
Well, we had grocery stores. The post office had a grocery section and a cobbler's section where they were fixed shoes, as well as the post office. Candy counter. Cookies, you picked them out yourself and put them in a bag and weighed them. They came in big containers.
And that was right here in the mills?
Right here in the village, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Dresden was very different then.
But it's that, you can.
What was the name of the store?
Well, there's Hope Bickford's, which is gone. You think one, say, oh, Frank Goodwin
Yeah.
had one. And there's one way back of that. Goodwin. When I was little, there was one next door to the little alley house that we lived in. The building's gone. Frank Goodwin's mother lived there.
Now I can't come up with a name now.
That's okay.
If I ever did.
Now, did you go to Gardner to go shopping as well for other things?
My mother never learned to drive until she was about 25 here. And then we did go once a year or so, just for certain kinds of shopping. We had stores right here, and that's what we bought. But you might buy something you can't find here, up there, that sort of thing. But that's all the time we ever would go. And we had a car with the windows that had the not leather, cellophane. Cellophane, celluloid, that's the word.
Isinglass?
Isinglass, okay.
That's from what? Oklahoma?
Oklahoma.
Yes.
Isinglass curtains you can pull right down in case there's a change in the weather.
Singing part of Oklahoma. Singing part of Oklahoma with the isinglass curtains that you pull right down in case there's a change in the weather. Can I?
You go ahead.
I'm learning, and you're never too old to learn.
We didn't need to go shopping. We didn't live from hand to mouth. We didn't have to go to get something for tomorrow's breakfast or tonight's supper.
Yeah.
We had everything. We raised things. We didn't depend. We couldn't go. And clothing. The woman of the house made the clothing. Knit. There was a lot of mail order catalogs. Sears, Roebuck, and Montgomery Ward.
Right.
That my folks probably went somewhere more often than hers did because we had cows and we had hens and we had to get grain for them. So, but my father would store grain during the winter time, because there would be about 6 weeks that the roads would be so muddy they'd be impassable. So he would stockpile grain. The barn was full of hay for the cattle. So, but we went primarily to Gardner. Although in the beginning, early days, my folks went to Richmond a lot. But when the toll went on the bridge, that seemed expensive. So on the Richmond Bridge. So.
When did that happen?
And my father was he had lived for 15 years in Pittston, which was nearer Gardner. He was more Gardner oriented, perhaps, than we were.
And you went to Richmond more than?
No, we not in my day. No, we went to Gardner.
Now, was there a theater in town?
Well, home production.
Home production?
There was amateur theater in town, right? Amateur theater? You used to play in plays, you told
You mean
me.
me?
Yes.
Oh.
In the upstairs of one of those
Something
buildings.
that we did from the time we were in school. Our teacher loved to have us put on a show for parents for Christmas or something, and the town kept on doing it, so that there'd be all sorts of people get together and put on a play down here in the Masonic Building.
Yeah.
What kind of plays did you put on?
I even have some of the books stowed away. They were always a lot of fun, family thing. Yeah, a lot of fun. And I know we needed a baby in one of them. And I had a sister who was 3 years old. So we put her in a basket in the back of the room, the stage, and she just lay down in there. You could just see a little head up here. So as I say, we did all sorts of it. My husband and I used to love to do that, plays.
Did you do musical plays?
We sang.
Uh-huh.
He and I both sang together, yeah. And we loved dancing, you know, the real dancing, not today.
Where did you dance?
Right down here at this hall,
Which hall is that?
the Masonic.
The Masonic?
And there would be people who would put on, at graduation, everybody went. High school graduation, there was always a graduation ball. And we always go back. And no matter how old you got, you'd still go back on that day. But other than that, we'd go to other people come around and play. And
Were these square dances?
they had square dances, yes, but very little where I went here.
More like ballroom dancing.
Mostly ballroom.
Foxtrot and
Foxtrot. Waltzes. I don't know what else. That's all I got. All I knew, I guess.
What about you, Ellen?
Oh, it was about the same with me. It started in town school. We would have maybe a Thanksgiving program, and we would have and certainly Christmas we'd have a play then, and we didn't have any ante rooms. We changed under a top or a blanket in the corner, and when we got to high school, we had prize speaking every spring, and sometimes it would be a 3-act play, sometimes it would be 1-act plays put on by different classes. So and that's one thing I was taught at the Masonic Building, to speak up and project your voice out so it could be heard in the back of the room. Now they talk down, you can't hear them at all, and that's one thing that.
Yeah, you could tell when you stood there whether your voice was going to the right place or not. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
And the church put on plays. It was one of the fundraisers, and Grandpa's twin sister is one that the title I remember, and it was fun. It was entertaining. We didn't do too much dancing other than graduation ball until the fire department had square dances. So they ran square dances for quite a number of years. And of course, if you want to call it entertainment, was when the fire department ran bingo games for years and years that supported the fire department, completely supported the fire department. It bought trucks, it built the building, and paid all the electrical bill, heating bills, everything.
What did you do on the 4th of July?
Well, my father had a gun, a shotgun that came from Edinburgh, Scotland. The whole family story back of that. But every 4th of July he'd take it out and shoot it off. It has been on television, not television, they wanted to, on radio. Been on radio about it, and it's been in magazines. I have the whole articles. And this man came from Edinburgh. He left his home without telling them where they were going, put it that way, and he was a wealthy person. And he met my grandfather, and they got acquainted with each other, and they went hunting together. And nobody knew that this man was rich until you see in the news article that I have, someone was finding fault with him or something and said, "You don't even know how to make change." He said, "You might be surprised I could buy you out." That's all was ever said, that they got any idea that he was wealthy. That I've had the Earl of Aberdeen come here since then to see Dresden, where his ancestor went, and because it was my family. And I don't have the gun because it's pretty valuable, and the family said, "We'll take care of that." It's not been sold, it's been hidden.
Was there a parade and fireworks on the 4th, or did you go someplace for that?
We have had one that I have some pictures of, but not every time. This was one for, what was it, Eleanor? Some celebration of a 250th, was it?
No, just a 200.
200 or something?
Yeah.
In 1994.
That's it, 1994. That's the 200th anniversary. And we did have a parade, and it was great. I have pictures of the whole thing, yeah. Snapshots.
What about Halloween? Did you do anything special on Halloween?
Oh, yes. Come knocking at your door. Run away, go find them. Yes, that's even since the 40s. They've come here when my kids were little.
Dresden
I
had
don't know about that. Don't hear much about it today.
Dresden had
I
a
know
town.
Halloween, they used to come to the house. I always had things out here for them. It'd be 15, 16 with their parents, generally. There's only one that come alone. We lived right here. All came with their cars, brought their children, came in and went out.
Did you go to the same churches?
No, my father was not a church member, but he was religious. He had his own thoughts, his own believing, and he respected anybody who went to church. So I went to the Methodist Church, which was next door. But I mean, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't go to any other church or anything of that nature. It's just that my father he felt there were too many people who go to church and covers them up.
And he had a mechanic shop?
He had a mechanic. He was a boat designer and builder to start with. Then boats began to go by because automobiles came in. So he continued with his boat building for wealthy people, but he had to turn to automobiles. So he became an auto mechanic.
And Eleanor, did you go attend church, or?
Yes, my family attended the Methodist Church here in Dresden Mills. And one day, way back, one Sunday, my mother looked out and saw a fire on the roof of your father's building.
Right.
And she looked around to see who she could get their attention of. All the men were sound asleep. My father used to go to church until he woke up and everybody was looking at him, and he guessed he must have snored, so he didn't go anymore.
A hard-working farmer.
Yeah. They were. But no, when we had the Dresden Historical Society going quite a number of years, and we were talking about a fundraiser of some kind, and I guess we probably said a meal, and Doris mentioned the harvest suppers that the church used to put on. And that was 22 or 23 years ago, and the Dresden Historical Society is still continuing the harvest supper.
It's a home-cooked meal.
Do you do hunters' breakfasts as well? Hunters' breakfast in hunting season?
Do you know if they do it in Pittston or we don't do it here? But I know people go to a hunter's breakfast, but Leslie never did.
No, they may have tried it once or twice, but
Okay, no, I never.
no, other than the local eateries may continue, may have something special, may get open up a little earlier on November 1 or whenever hunting season opens.
Did you ever travel the railroads?
That's the only way we got back to Massachusetts. In other words, I was born in Massachusetts. My father was here, born here, so he came back. So, as I say, we came by train.
How did you do that? Where did you go from?
To Richmond. And somebody with a car could pick us up.
And from Richmond, where did you?
Oh, Massachusetts, Lynn, near Boston.
But I mean, did it go to Bath and then?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we had to change in Portland sometimes, but I don't think we changed more than once. We may have stopped at Bath. I don't know whether I don't recall.
No, this line went to Brunswick, Augusta, Gardner, Richmond, Bodenham, Brunswick.
And you used to go?
Shut this off. In 1929, the first one came up here at 2 sails, and I saw it. I was living downstreet, of course, not here. But
That was the last sailing ship?
That's the last one I ever heard of.
In 29.
1929. Yes, it's very fascinating to think about the boats and how they served this country, and these little cities and so forth.
And did you have rowboats?
Oh, I had a rowboat as a child. Oh, yeah. My father, of course, had outboard motors, but I never ran one of those as a child. I'd row up the river, take my lunch, go up into a creek, eat my lunch and come back. I was alone. I mean, I didn't have any brothers or sisters at all.
And you went smelting too?
I'm sorry.
Did you go smelting?
Smelting? I wasn't a smelter, so to speak, but yes, I have tried it. Oh, yes, it's nice. See them all on the river here.
And Eleanor, what was your time on the river? What did you do? Anything or?
Not too much. In my older days, I was given a rowboat, and I rowed on the Kennebec some. My folks were too busy farming to do much. My father didn't consider himself really capable of handling a boat. My brother was almost scared to death of the river. So, and I guess my parents had seen enough of the river during the ice industry and the other days. But I remember on the Kennebec, the coal barges, the tugs would win, bringing the coal barges up and towing them back out empty. And they call them barges now. We called them tankers that brought the primarily gasoline and fuel oil up the river.
And you said the ice industry?
Ice industry.
Tell us a little bit about that.
That boom that started in 1870. and in 50 years it was completely gone, although somebody had said in the beginning there, we've got an industry now that always be around, nothing will replace it. Well, fortunately electricity did, because the river got so polluted that ice wouldn't hardly freeze. But it was a big industry for the 50 years that it was on the river. There were big houses, I think, I'm going to say 11 sets of houses in Dresden. They were over in Richmond as well, storing thousands of tons of ice in the winter, creating a lot of employment for local people. People from 3 miles or so off would walk to the ice houses. People that live farther away would board. Each set of houses had a boarding house where they boarded. People nearby took boarders, and then
did they hand saw the ice?
No more than they could help. They had to do some hand sawing, but the ice was scored by horse-drawn cutters and to a certain depth, and then a good hit with a needle bar or a busting bar would break the ice. So they didn't saw any more than they could absolutely get away with.
Now, did they have conveyors, or how did they move the ice?
It was almost, well, I guess in every case they had steam-powered, steam-driven endless chains that took the ice up into the houses. In shipping out, it was more a gravity thing.
Crossings have ferries in your day?
Richmond to Dresden.
So you could talk a little
Before
about
me, there
that.
was one from this corner across here, Kidder Ferry.
So
one
you
further
can tell
down.
about
And-
those.
And did they take cars across, or just people?
Not in that
Horse and
day, there
buggy?
weren't
Horse
any,
and
but the cars in my day, yes.
Yeah.
The one to Richmond, yes.
Yeah.
But these two little ones, no. They built bridges.
Yeah.
That went across the eastern? There was
couple
a ferry that
ferries.
went across the eastern?
A couple of
Not
them.
the Eastern, Kennebec.
Yeah.
There were two ferries on the Eastern
Yeah.
that I have heard about.
Okay.
Kidder
And
Ferry.
when did the steel bridge go in?
You know the date, Eleanor? Thought it was in 36.
Well, which bridge are you talking about? There's three.
Whoops.
There's a ferry at Richmond, between Dresden and Richmond, Dresden and Swan Island, and Dresden and Richmond, up until about 1931. I'm not positive, it was the very early 30s that they built the 5-span steel bridge, and that did away with the ferry. 1936 flood took out 3 spans of the Richmond Bridge when it was only less than 5 years old, and it was replaced. The spans were replaced, and it was open within a year and a half. It was kind of devastating. It was a toll bridge at the time. The fellows said when the bridge tenders, toll takers, when they went off that night, they could feel the bridge shaking. The ice came down, just lifted them, the spans off the pins. One span stopped down in front of Richmond Village,
Whoa.
at the foot of the Main Street hill there. One of them was on the head of the island, another one was somewhere in the area.
So it was a early spring flood?
It was
Ice out.
Friday, March 13th, 1936.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Now, what did they do when, what did they do when you was talking about barging things up? The river must have frozen over.
Oh yes, it was only and they had to stockpile grain. They had to stockpile the oil and whatever. But it was from.
Yes, I was young, teenager, and with some others. We decided we'd walk over. We heard about the big flood, so we had to stay up in the woods as we went. You know, we couldn't. A lot of low places were filled, and we were standing right there and saw two of those
Spans.
Thank you, Eleanor. Spans float on the ice dam. You see, there was ice had dammed up to this one island. So the whole thing, when it went down, it didn't go away all the way. It stayed and then tipped, you see, like that. So I saw the two of them, Leslie and I.
And you have pictures?
There are pictures, yes. Bruce Alexander and Barbara Hoodlet were over there with Barbara's father. And Bruce and Barbara went down into a house where Horace and Agnes Gilpatrick were living. They came, and nobody was home. They came back, and there's flowers on the table. Could we have the flowers? They looked around, and the house was floating off. A town bag? No, that was back in the. Oh, when was the town banned? Back in the 1890s, maybe? It's in the history of Dresden.
Yeah,
You just showed me a picture.
I was in on that earlier than she was. It started really concretely when the brick schoolhouse at West Dresden was no longer used as a school, but the neighborhood children were playing house in it. And the neighbors in the area that went to school there felt that it ought to be preserved, and we started the Historical Society in order to preserve that school, primarily.
Oops, they're coming again.
We worked towards refinishing the brick building, and a new roof and new shingles anyway, and from cleaning it and getting displays, and I think it was 1976 that we opened it as a museum, and then we've worked, saved money, and gathered things and so forth, and then we did get a second building given to us, which was a former schoolhouse, and moved that onto the place after quite a struggle. But we do have another building, and still not room enough. And we're hoping to gather more information, more items, more history all the time.
Now, do you work in cooperation with Pownellborough, the courthouse?
To a degree, yes. We're not that closely associated, but we certainly respect. Well, I do anyway. I go down the road and I get down Cedar Grove. Now, where am I going? Am I going to the courthouse, which is practically the next right, or am I going to the brick school, which is another mile and a half down the road?
Yeah, I see.
She was more connected with Fort Western in Augusta.
Oh, you were a docent at Fort Western, weren't you?
Wonderful time.
Tell us about that a little. Go ahead, tell us a little bit about.
Well, when I retired from teaching, the man in town runs in Weston, said, "I'd like to have you come up." So he gives you a schedule for about a week, and it's like going to a seminar at college. So you learn all the history that he has learned about this area, and then we go on. So I enjoyed it very much, because all the lumber that built that building came from. It's right down here. That sort of thing. It ties in, you know, that sort of thing. But it has, he has a lot of wonderful history that he's researched in the State House and so forth. And I worked there for 10 years. And also, you don't only just work in there, but maybe a school teacher wants you to come to the classroom. So they would send